I would like to welcome you to the workshop where we focus on children in high-risk cases. And I'm really pleased to see so many colleagues on this particular workshop, because this also shows me how much we do care about children in our work and how much we want to be child-centered while we work with perpetrators. Before I go into the session and the topic, I would like just to give you a few technical information. So the first one is that we will record the workshop. However, we will make sure that we don't show any parts where participants speak or whenever we have some kind of discussion. So this is basically going to be just a recording of what facilitators speak. So you can be relaxed regarding that. I would also appreciate if you could say hi in the chat, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about the country that you're coming from, your organization. That's always nice to hear. And in these short workshops, we don't have a lot of time to get to know each other properly. I would also appreciate if you can keep your cameras on. If that's okay for you, because that's something that's going to help us all to have a different kind of experience during the workshop. And thanks a lot for doing that. My name is Sandra Jovanović-Belotić. I am a psychologist. I am working in WWP as training and capacity building manager. I also have more than 10 years of experience of facilitating perpetrator programs, and in WWP I am in charge for our child protection policy, different issues. I'm also child focal point in WWP. So during this workshop, we will focus on several aspects of what we call child-centered perpetrator work. So we will focus on the impact on children of high-risk violence, but also of our activities and our programs. And then we will look into what actually perpetrator programs can do, what is the responsibility and what's in the scope of activities of perpetrator programs. And we will go through several key points there. And I will share eventually with you one of the tools that we use in WWP that we call OCRI, and that we find really helpful for understanding service-generated risks of our programs that focus on children. It's really nice to see some of your faces, so thank you for having your cameras on. Okay, so also before we start, this is a workshop format, so it's a bit different from the presentations that we had during the day. So this is the format where we will work interactively. So I encourage you to engage, get involved. If you have any kind of question, just raise your hand or unmute yourself, because this is also an opportunity that we share experiences and learn from each other, which is really valuable in this kind of network. Okay, so what I would like you to do is to start to activate your imagination and to imagine one of the typical situations that we all have. So let's imagine a Mark. He's attending a perpetrator program. He has a partner. She's called Jill. She's attending partner contact and support service. And they have a son, Stephen. What I would like you to do now is to step into the shoes of Stephen and to think about what Stephen thinks, feels in different stages of the program that we are running with the man. And try to think throughout the process. So try to think about what he thinks and feels before the program, what he thinks and feels in the intake phase, halfway through the program, and at the end of the program. The reason why we did this exercise is to step into the shoes of children and think about the impact of violence on children. And I think that you summarized that really well, but also direct and indirect impact that our programs have on children. And this is the perspective that we don't often have when we work with children. And this is something that we would like to bring into the conversation in this workshop. So I'll share my screen and we will dive into this in more detail. So this is an example of how feelings and thinking can look like for a child when man is on a program. And here we can see what you really nicely described and noticed, that some of it will be connected with the abuse that the child is experiencing, but some of it will be connected with our very intervention. And these are service-generated risks of programs that also apply to children. However, these service-generated risks, when we think about women survivors, we do try to mitigate them usually. So we have partner contact and support, we have conversations with women, we talk about realistic expectations of programs, her hopes, fears, possible manipulation in the program. So we do have some mitigation measures. The question is, do we have mitigation measures for children who also experience similar service-generated risks? One of the research that you're probably familiar with showed that around 50% of parents, so men and women, don't tell anything to their children about the program that man is attending. And the same proportion is regardless if man lives with their children or doesn't live with their children. So in a lot of cases, children are left alone with all these thoughts and all these emotions. We know that there's severe and long-standing impact. You summarized that really well. I don't want to go into that. I want to just remind us all, and this is something that we all know about, is that when we think about children survivors, we don't make a difference between those who actually are exposed to intimate partner violence between their parents, or are actually physically or psychologically directly hurt, let's say like that, because we know that research says that the consequences they experience are the same. And we also know that when there is an intimate partner violence, there is a greater risk that children will be emotionally or physically abused in the family, so that this is something that we need to keep an eye on. But also children are affected by the perpetrator program their fathers are attending, and this is regardless if programs have direct contact with children or not. So this summarizes some of the conclusions from our previous discussion, that harm to children can come externally from our programs, but also internally. Our experience of WWP from working with a lot of organizations is that we usually focus on these external risks and try to mitigate those risks and to work around those risks, but we don't pay enough attention on internal risks, so risks that can be caused by our services and our activities. This is why this workshop and this presentation is gonna focus a little bit on the external, but a lot on the internal risks to children. If we think about high-risk cases, so everything that we've been speaking about so far can is true for all cases that we work with, right? Is there anything specific in terms of needs or risks to children in cases of high risk, high harm violence? In high risk cases, there's definitely a need to think even more about safety of children and potential risks for children. Needs of a child are the same in these cases. However, in high-risk cases, there is greater probability that safety and even these psychological needs are more threatened than in other cases. It could be for reasons like Brian explained, that there's a risk of severe harm, even murder. But there could be also cases that, I don't know, violence is so severe, or there's also addiction problems, housing problems. So a lot of problems that affect the family and children in the family, which actually make these basic pillars of children's needs severely threatened. So when we think about children in high-risk cases, it's important to think, yes, needs are the same. However, probability that safety and physiological needs even are more threatened is higher. So to keep that in mind. However, when we look at our interventions, we usually see perpetrator program who focuses on women and men, and other institutions. This could be social welfare services, police, also focusing on women and men. And sometimes these other institutions focus on children. We also see that sometimes perpetrator programs have some activities that support directly children. We could hear that ATV in Norway, for example, has this kind of services. However, this is really unique and exceptional practice. It's not something that we see on the European level. It's something that is developing. We have also research that shows that there's a great need to have interventions for children, and that as perpetrator programs, we also need to think about that. This is, again, a snapshot from the Mirabal research, which shows how being in a program affects children. So you can see that the, I can't see this really well now, but you can see that the blue line presents how the presence of certain indicators before the program, and the red showing how that changed throughout the program. So we can see that children are less frightened of a perpetrator, that moms less worry about, the children worry less about their mom's safety. However, that some of the consequences on children remain. Like children still get aggressive and frustrated, they have problems in social relationships and so on. So one of the conclusions of this research is that although children are central in our programs, they are in a way invisible because there are no direct interventions for children, and that there is a need for more direct support services for children of men who are at the perpetrator programs. So what can we do as perpetrator programs, and what is our role? One of the things that we could do is to think about supporting children directly or referring them to specialized services if they exist. But other three, let's say, key activities that we can take is we could support men to be better fathers. And we can do that through focusing on men's understanding of violence, impact on children, understanding how violence influences mother's parenting, and supporting development of positive parental skills. This is something that a lot of programs do and have in place. But we also can advocate for child's best interest And in many cases, this is also advocating for perpetrators' accountability. And what we mean by that is supporting other agencies to see intimate partner violence as parenting choice, and also to be able to identify and react upon possible patterns of control that perpetrators are using when they're in certain systems. And also, we can start to think about how our activities and our services influence on children. So to identify and manage what we call service-generated risks, and to develop procedures and tools for identifying and managing these kind of risks. By the end of this workshop, we will focus a bit more on advocating for child best interest, and also about what tools we can use to think about the service-generated risks of our activities. So we've chosen to focus on these two. So when thinking about advocating for perpetrators' accountability and child best interest, any ideas on what is the role of perpetrator programs in this process? So what can or should we as perpetrator programs do? Any thoughts? Okay, I'll just move forward. So one of the things is to stay focused, but also help other agencies to focus on men's parenting. What you see in this drawing presents double standards and different expectations of women and men as parents. So a situation at the park, if dad is sitting at the park and looks at his phone, people might say, wow, that's a great dad, he took the kids to the park. While if women does the same, comments could be, wow, she's not watching for her kids, she's watching at her phone. This represents social norms. If they exist in park or at the hairdresser, they definitely exist also in our institutions and systems. So what's really important to focus on as perpetrator programs is to highlight and dismantle these double standards. And whenever we can, to call for good parenting of a man, and to make sure that they also are held accountable in a role of a parent, and that their actions are also seen through the lens of equal parenting. So perpetrator programs have a role to foster this in their own services and in the work with men, but also in their cooperation with other agencies. What we also see is that many agencies don't understand intimate partner violence as something that is harmful for children. And they kind of leave that in the area of partner conflict and partner relations. And they don't recognize the connection with the parental role. So what's really important for us as perpetrator programs is to explain that this is also a parenting choice, that men are fathers even when they are violent toward their partners, and that they are threatening the safety and some really basic needs of children, and that this should be taken into account. So as perpetrator programs, we have an important role to bring this perspective also to other institutions. One of the groups mentioned this, and I want briefly also to focus on the aspect of possible manipulations of the system. And we see that in lots of cases when this is happening, children are involved and children are harmed. What we talk about is are situations when perpetrators try to manipulate system and to use police, social welfare, judiciary system as a way to continue the abuse toward their partners. In many cases, they do it in ways that they make false allegations, usually around parenting, that they try to get the custody over children, to get access to their children, and they do it in a way that's actually harmful also for children, but of course to the women as well. There are several ways how men usually do that. Safe and Together model explain these three key ways. So by making false allegations, they're usually around poor parenting, exploiting survivors' vulnerabilities. So if women is affected by violence and she's not feeling very well, that's going to be presented as a lack of competencies in her parenting, or using status, power, finances, and privilege to kind of get what they want in different kinds of proceedings. So as perpetrator programs, it's really important that we know that this is possible and that we have a clear stand in these situations, and support also other institutions, but also men, to recognize that this is the continuation of abuse. I don't know how much the concept of parental alienation is something that is present in different countries. This is really controversial topic and controversial concept. What was found was that it's really connected with acts of domestic violence, and that this concept is usually used as another instrument of violence toward survivors. UN conducted the really complex analysis of how parental alienation ties with domestic violence around the world. And some of the things that they found is that in many cases, this is used as a tactic to continue coercive control over victims. So, for example, in Canada, in almost half of allegations of parental alienation, these were actually cases of domestic abuse. And the one who was pressing charges was actually a person who was previously alleged as a perpetrator. The use of parental alienation is highly gendered and frequently used against mothers. So we can see that across the world, but I've picked up some of the data. For example, women were accused in 66% of cases, while men were accused in 70% of cases in Brazil. In the US, if father has alleged alienation by the mother, her custody rights have been removed in 44% of the time, while vice versa, this happened only in 28% of the time. And also that in these cases, usually institutions lose focus of domestic violence. So they kind of shift and think about the situation only as a parental dispute and a custody matter, without focusing on domestic violence and taking actions in this in this direction. The reason why we are bringing this to your attention, because as perpetrator programs, you will have a powerful say in these cases. I know that some of you are invited to courts, others are not invited to courts. Some make put reports for the child protection agencies. So it's really important for you to know, to identify these kind of patterns of abuse that are actually abusive toward children, and to react and support children and survivors in these processes. Okay, so one of the things that we can do is to advocate for child best interest. Another thing that we can do is to focus on ourselves and to be accountable toward our practice. And it's really important that we do that. So what we're going to do now, we will focus on how to identify and manage service-generated risks. So these are risks that are posed by our organization toward children. Really briefly, these service-generated risks can be posed by our staff or partners, so people who work in our programs or people who we cooperate with, or by our activities, the things that we do. They can be direct, they can be indirect, they can be conducted intentionally or unintentionally, but we need to be aware of the whole scope of potential harm to children and to take that into account when planning our activities. This is something that we call safe child safeguarding. So we think about child safeguarding as the responsibility that organizations have to make sure that their staff, operations, and programs don't do harm to children, and that they have procedures in place to identify, mitigate, and respond to these kind of situations. I would really like to hear about how this is done in your organizations, but I'm not sure if we will have enough time, because what I would like to present you now are some possible ways how you can think about the service-generated risks that you have. And I just want to give you a few hints about the terminology. So the terminology that we will use is a bit different than used in other sectors. The reason for that is that in other sectors that focus on child safeguarding, risk assessment is actually something that is related to the activities of the organization and the risk of harm to children, while we know that in domestic violence cases, this is a bit different, that we think about the risks of intimate partner violence and domestic violence, which is why we are using now a different term. We call this organizational child risk identification, or abbreviation OCRI. So this is a long explanation to basically just tell you that when we say OCRI, we think about the process of identifying organizational risks to children. So I want to introduce you to case study, and then I will show you one of the tools that you can use in your practice to be able to identify and mitigate risks to children. So what I want you to do now is to imagine this situation. You are a perpetrator program and you work with a partner support service. And partner support professional receives a phone call from Nora. She wants to meet with her women worker. She explains that she needs to bring her children to the service. And this is Amy, who has 3 years, and John, who has 5 years. The reason that she has to do that is that she has no one else to take care for them. So she needs to bring them with her to the meeting. And during the last meeting, Nora mentioned that she plans to move to another city as she's afraid that her ex-partner, Mike, could take their kids away from her. Mike is at the perpetrator program for 3 months. He has supervised visitation to his children, and he feels that this situation is completely unfair. And in your partner support service, you have a female employee who is happy to take care of Amy and John while Nora is at the meeting. She usually takes the calls, welcomes other clients who come to the service. This is her job. In the service, there is no specialized room for children, but there is a waiting room where children could be accommodated. So this is the case that we will be looking at. From what you know about risk assessment, do we see any factors of high risk here in this case? We also know that she is planning to move, to leave. Sometimes that's also additional risk factor. We, of course, don't know a lot about this. Is really brief case study, but we could say that this is something that bears risks for children and for women. We're going to think about potential risks to children in this situation. So I want you to be perpetrator program professionals or women's support services in this situation, okay? And to think about different potential risks. We're going to do it in a structured way. So I will show you now the form that we use in WWP that actually helps us to think about these risks. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that as a group, and we will do that, let's say, really briefly, because this is a process that usually takes around 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Okay? So this is something that we call OCRI checklist. There are some things that you can enter. You can describe the activity. You would basically describe children, and Nora will come with her children to partner contact and support. This is what we know. So this is the situation. You can add what team members are present. Is there a contact with children? In this case, we will have direct contact with children because they will come to our organization. Is there an impact on children? Yes, there could be, direct and indirect. And then you come to this section where you think about risks. For doing this, we need to work together and think about all things that can potentially go wrong. So at this moment, don't think about, is this realistic? Can this really happen, or it can't happen? We want to gather and to brainstorm together about all potential risks to children in this situation. So there could be a situation that father comes there. I'm not sure that there's a repeated act of violence, maybe, that father takes the children away. Yeah, what can else go wrong? Great. Anything else? Is there something that can go wrong in our service? So, for example, if children are there and mom is in the session, they can hear that she's planning to leave, for example, and then they can pass this information, right? Mm-hmm. Children can hear on... Okay, exactly. So when you do this in your team, you would make a really big list and you would ask for new suggestions as long as someone can think about anything additional. And you would write down all suggestions. I will stop here because we have limited time. However, just from this really short brainstorming, we can see that there are some severe risks. Some are related to the man. Some are related to our service. Like children can hurt themselves, they can fall down from the stairs, they can wander away because this person needs to also do other things. They can hear things. They can maybe hear things that are victimizing them and that are emotionally hard, but they can also hear some things that they can then transmit to their fathers. So it's a really risky situation. How do we proceed from here? Because here you will have a list of 20 possible risks, and you note down all of these risks. Then we need to prioritize these risks. We do this in a way that we think about the possible impact to children and how likely is that something's going to happen. Something like that is going to happen. And we use this table here to make this kind of prioritization. So for every risk we think about, okay, if this happens, what is the impact on children? Is it negligible, minor, moderate, major, or catastrophic? And we add number to that risk. Then we think about, okay, how likely is that this is going to happen? Rare, unlikely, possible, likely, or almost certain. When we score the impact and the likelihood, we will get a certain score. What is our recommendation is that any risk that is in red or in orange, we need to have a mitigation plan for that risk. So we need to take those risks into the next column, which is risk plan, and to think about what will we do to prevent these risks. You can always decide, sometimes we decide that the impact is catastrophic, but the likelihood is really rare. But we say, you know, it's a catastrophic impact. Even if it's rare, I want to have a mitigation plan for that. So you can also, as a team, decide to take some of the risks that are in green or yellow in your mitigation plans. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is really nice way to prioritize different risks and to see where your energy will go. So let's try to do this together. If we think about what is the impact if father takes the children from 1 to 5, what would you say that the impact is?
Catastrophic.
Katja says 5. What do others think? I can't see people, so I'll take that as agreement.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Sheila. And how likely is that this is going to happen from 1 to 5?
Like 1 for me.
Okay, what do others think?
Maybe 3, because we don't know an awful lot of information from the brief case study.
Yeah. So in a real team discussion, you would discuss these things. So you will say, why, Katja, you think it's 1? Why, Deborah, you think it's 3? And then you would agree on some number. Okay. It's not so crucial that everyone agrees, you know, that it's 2.3 or 2.6. We don't have to be that precise. What's important is that this is going to go into the mitigation plan. So that's the reason why we do this. So keep that in mind. So the score here would be 10 to 15, for example, which means that this would be red. Okay. So let's think about, for example, that children can go away. If this happens, what is the impact?
5.
5. What do others think?
I don't think it would be. Yeah. They might just walk. What do you think? They might just walk out and play outside somewhere or walk away.
Depends on what they do, right?
Yeah.
Depends if father
and
is
how
nearby.
soon we find them.
Yeah.
But they can easily walk on a street as well. So children who are not guarded by anyone, any you know, adult person, so they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. So again, you would discuss these issues in your team, right? Then we would think about how likely is that something's going to happen.
So it would be the same as father takes the children, I think.
Like 2, 3.
Or 3, yeah.
So if we would have more time, we would discuss this in more detail. However, you understand what is the process. So first we put our, I say that we put our black sunglasses, you know, like we see everything negative. And we think about, you know, what can go wrong, what can go wrong, what can go wrong. Then we think about what is the impact, what is the likelihood, and we prioritize risks. Then you can, color them differently based on the level of risk and decide what's going to go in the mitigation plan. In the mitigation plan, you put the risk and you think about mitigation measures. What is really important is that you think about mitigation measures that you can actually do, that are realistic for your context. So not what would be nice to do, what we would wish to do, but what we can really do with the resources and the context that we work in. And you note down those mitigation measures. And you note down who is responsible for making that happen and what is the deadline to do that, and you create a full plan. Okay? Our experience with conducting this process is really, really positive. I don't know how much you were able to have a feel for it, because this was really a short demonstration. However, every time we have this kind of a meeting, we think about things that we would never think before. For example, the case study that I just presented. In my practice, we had these cases at least 5-4 times, maybe not exactly with, the fear of children might be taken away, but children coming to the partner support service in the office, and some professional is watching after them. We had this quite a lot. When we do this kind of planning, we can really see what are potential risks to children, and we can organize our service in a way that is safe for children. And we can plan that well. We do that always as a team. So never as one professional, we always do that as a team. And in WWP, we do that for annually. We think about what activities we will lead through the OCRI. In perpetrator programs, that can really be on a case basis whenever there are some risks for children appearing, or whenever you are conducting prevention program in schools, or having, I don't know, different kind of services for young people, or having an online campaign targeted youth, or you can use it for different kinds of activities. I will share a Padlet where you can find the form and also some resources, including the presentation. And if you need any kind of support in going through this process, don't hesitate to get in touch. We'll be happy to support you. And I would really like to thank you all for taking part in this workshop, and looking forward to see you again.